Lupus LA would like to thank our generous sponsors for their support of the Your Story, Our Fight podcast. Emerge Business Solutions serves as a personal and professional CFO for clients across a wide spectrum of industries. They handle financial affairs with integrity and transparency. Gemini Beauty believes in beauty for a cause, and in their case, the cause is lupus. The team at Gemini is changing the skincare game for good. Hello and welcome to another episode of the Lupus LA podcast, Your Story, Our Fight. I'm your host, Adam Selkowitz, and as always, I want to thank our sponsors for allowing us to tell these inspirational lupus stories. And we have another one for you today for sure. I want to introduce you all to Shamekka Marty. Shamekka, thanks for joining the podcast.
Thank you for having me.
Of course. So Shamekka, we're going to get to this, but you are fresh off a kidney transplant. And so, I mean, that's where I want to sort of lead to, but I want to start kind of at the beginning. I know you have lupus in your family, and so lupus has really been a part of your story since a young age. So tell me a little bit about growing up.
My life was a little bit different. My mother had lupus. She was a single mother. She also took in my grandmother, who had severe rheumatoid arthritis and was bedridden for the last 20 years of her life. So when I can remember, even like at 5, just seeing my grandmother and then it happening to my mom, my life was making sure that they were taken care of. Because if my mom couldn't, do anything for my grandmother, and the government also cut the visiting aides that would come for my grandmother, I would have to jump in and help feed and bathe her. My mom had in-house dialysis, so we had the tanks there. So my life, my childhood, that's why I didn't have a lot of people over, because it was just a lot of sickness. And whereas most people, I remember very clearly, my husband always yells at me because I never lock the door. And I told him, I said, it was instilled in me to not lock the door, because if my grandmother, she had life alert, needed an emergency, we've had windows busted to try and get in to help her. And that costs. So for me, it was always like, don't lock the door. Nobody was worried about an intruder. It was, don't lock the door. Don't lock the windows. We need to be able to get to her if my mom's not there. That was my life growing up. And I had to get my license. Actually, I didn't get my license, so I say that. But I had to learn how to drive. And in New Jersey, the legal age is 17. I learned at 14 because my mom needed someone to take her to doctor's appointments if she was having a flare. And so I would park the car. I would take the car and park it all the way in the back so nobody could see this little girl that's sitting on top of books to drive and knowing that I had to leave. It's things like that that aren't normal, but that was normal every day for me.
That's incredible. So you drove your mother to her appointments at 14, 15 years old?
Mm-hmm. I even got pulled over one time. I almost did. And I started freaking out. And I was like, oh my God, I'm never going to get my license, because if you get pulled over before you get your license, then they'll delay it. So the cop came and he was like, do you know why I pulled you over? You were speeding. And I was trying to get home. And I started breaking down crying, and I'm like, we just had a death in the family and I just wanted to get out and just, I needed some fresh air. And I think because I was hysterically crying and just spitting out whatever, he was just like, okay, well, just take it down and don't speed again. And then he walked away and I was like, oh my God, thank you. Thank you so much. A sigh of relief. Now, I do have a brother. And when I got a little bit older, I was a teen mom. So I had my son when I was 17, and he took over because I wasn't able to stay there. There was no room for me and my son. He got pulled over. He did the dumbest thing, and I'm sorry if he sees this. He went around a bus. You're not supposed to go around a bus when the stop sign is there, when they're letting out children. And lo and behold, there was a cop there. So he got caught. I was like, you're not as smooth as me.
Now, was he underage also in order to drive your mom to appointments?
Yep.
Wow. That's tough. I mean, it's, you have to find ways to do what you have to do. I think that's dedication to your mom. And so tell me, you obviously knew about lupus at an early age. What do you think the impact on you was in terms of how it formed you as a person?
So it formed me as a person now, I'm vocal. When I was growing up, I was really shy unless you knew me. And it was because my mother really didn't talk that much about her illness. It would just be, I need you to do this. And I wouldn't even have time to react. It was just always do, 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 do. And I wanted her to explain a little bit more, even though now when I'm going through the things that I go through, I remember, oh yeah, mom went through that. Now I understand why she had ACT instead of Listerine because of the teeth problems that lupus causes. It's little things like that that I know now. And it was just so hush hush. Again, this was in the late 80s, early 90s of things occurring. There wasn't a lot of awareness out there. And everyone just thought my mom was fine. And I'm like, she's not fine. Come stay with us for a week. Or my grandmother being so positive. So I'm a mixture of both of them. Or not so much my mom because I'm more vocal, but telling people and educating them so they understand why I'm having a bad day. Today you saw me and I was doing a whole bunch of things, but the next day I may not be able to. And then my grandmother not being able to walk and feed herself or bathe herself, you would have thought she would be in high depression. If you were coming in there to cheer her up, she was cheering you up. That's the type of attitude that she had. And she loved the Bible. You could open it up at any part of the Bible and start reading. She'd finish the sentence for you. Again, she didn't have much to do, so she was just reading all the time.
Right.
But that shaped me as a person to appreciate and see the world. And if people go on any of my pages, you see me traveling all the time because that is instilled in me. I had a grandmother that couldn't go out to dinner with us, and people take that for granted.
Now, did your mom work during her illness as well?
Yeah, she rebounded when she got a kidney transplant, such as, what I had 3 months ago. And the kidney lasted for 7 years. So she had a good 7 years. She was working. She was the manager at Walmart. She also was a postal carrier. And when things were good, things were good. And then it was still like, hiccups here and there. But the kidney lasted for 7 years and then it rejected. And then 2 years later, she passed away.
Sorry about that. That's a long journey. I'm glad she had those 7 years to really kind of be able to not be so sick for that time of her life.
Yes. And, when people talk about teen pregnancy, especially back then, it's not so much celebrated now, but it's okay. So in my time when I became pregnant, and I just think about if I would have waited like a normal time, 27, to start my children, and she was able to see 2 of them. I have 3 kids. She was able to at least see 2 of them, and they were the light of her life. And honestly, 2 days before she passed away, she just weirdly came over and was like, I want to play with the kids. And I'm like, okay. And she was there for 10 hours. I was like, my mom's still here. She's just playing with the kids. And it's almost as if she knew what was going to happen. But that's why I was like, I might have been a teen mom, but I'm glad that I was.
How old were your kids when she passed away?
My son was 3 and my daughter was 1.5.
Yeah. No, I think that's sometimes there are just things that happen for the right reasons, right?
Yes. I mean, if I had kids now, I'd be like, oh God, no.
So tell me, at what point in your life did your symptoms start? Did you realize, I'm, kind of I'm going down this same path?
What I did learn was that it was a high possibility based on the fact that my mother and grandmother had something that I would probably get some autoimmune disease, not specifically lupus, but I knew what to look out for. So to be honest, it was like in my brain scaring me, like, when am I going to get it? And I figured I was out of the woods because most of the time people get it a little bit younger. And I started having these weird symptoms before I was actually diagnosed. And it was just something here and there, weird rashes, not the butterfly rash, but rashes all over my body, muscle aches. I had lost feeling in my tongue randomly for a month. And I turned 30 and all of a sudden my hands wouldn't open. And I'm like, okay, what in the world is going on? And then it went to my back, and I'm asking my husband, did you beat me in my sleep? Like, why does my back hurt so much? And then it became, I couldn't even brush my teeth or go to the bathroom because I couldn't extend my arms. And I kept telling the doctor, and they're like, oh, well, you have orthopedic issues. And they do a scan and there's nothing there. And I'm like, okay, my girlfriend's a nurse. I said, I know if I take prednisone, it's something autoimmune because it's making it go away. And I said, can you get me some prednisone so that I can prove a point to these doctors? Because they're like, well, we've already tested you. It's not there. And I'm like, I think you need to test me again. So they did test me again, and my girlfriend gave me the prednisone, and I was able to open up my hands and actually move. And it wasn't until I had a referral for my back for the orthopedic issues that didn't exist. He was like, why are you here? Your scan is fine. And I explained to him, he's like, you sound like my sister. She has lupus. And I said, that's funny you say that because that's what runs in my family. And about 10 minutes after I left his office, because he's like, call them back and tell them to run the test again. They called me up and said, yeah, you have a positive ANA. You should really look into seeing a rheumatologist. And that was from my primary care doctor. And I was like, I know I was right. But it's a little bit easier for me. Someone who doesn't know about the disease or navigate with it wouldn't have known, like, that's the first thing that pops in their head.
Right. Sure. Yeah. I mean, that gives you kind of a leg up, if you will, in terms of pushing the doctors to get to the right diagnosis, yes. Which in your heart, you knew what it was, from day one, I think.
Yes. And it wasn't anything where I was like, oh my God, it was for about a couple minutes. All right. Now, how are we going to deal with it, Shamekka? And I just started advocating. I was advocating before, but I was like, it's not why me, it's try me, and let's do this thing.
All right. I'm going to take a break on that posit. I love that saying. And I'm going to take a break, and then we're going to hear exactly kind of what you dealt with and how you dealt with it, and all about your advocacy that I know is so important to you. So we'll be right back with more from Shamekka Marty.
Lupus LA's Facebook Live Chat series connects leading lupus and health experts with our community to answer the most current and important questions. For more information, visit lupusla.org.
Welcome back to the Lupus LA podcast, Your Story, Our Fight. I'm your host, Adam Selkowitz, and talking to Shamekka Marty. And Shamekka, we just talked about really got up to that point where you got your diagnosis. So tell me, initially we're starting with a lot of joint pain and back pain and things like that. I know that you had some further complications. So tell me a little bit more about how your lupus evolved and where it's taken you.
Yes. So prior to my diagnosis, I was having a lot of weird things. They said I had shingles. Then they said that I had Epstein-Barr. They were just throwing a whole bunch of different diagnoses at me. And I'm like, none of this makes any sense. I was also battling, which they didn't diagnose until much later, endometriosis. When I had my third child, my oldest and my youngest are 10 years apart. I was trying to have kids in between that so they would be a little bit closer in age. But I started having all these miscarriages. And I'm like, well, it wasn't hard for me to have my first two. What is going on? And I remember my mom telling me that after she had me and then she had my brother, we're 4.5 years apart, that weird things kept happening to her after she had me and that it was hard for her to have my brother. When you have a lot of overlapping autoimmune diseases like I do, it's hard to tell, like, what is lupus? What is rheumatoid arthritis? What is Sjogren? What is Reynaud? But yeah, that's what I was experiencing. And like I said, I lost feeling in my tongue and I could eat, but I couldn't taste anything. So that's frustrating. And they couldn't figure it. They were like, maybe there's some nerve they were testing for nerve damage. And it eventually came back. And then when I got the what they called shingles at the time, they said it was stress related, which I'm pretty sure because there's a lot of studies that are done that say lupus and stress makes your body freak out. I'm like, well, I had chicken pox. Usually you get shingles if you didn't have chicken pox or something like that. So I found that really weird. And again, how did it go away? With steroids. Everything was throw steroids at it. The whole thing with my fingers, I type for a living. I do IT, project management. And when I kept having issues with my fingers and they would just be freezing up sometimes or just like moving on its own, they're like, oh, you have carpal tunnel because you type. And I'm like, that's the easiest answer to give. But really, I mean, I've been typing forever and it wasn't that kind. I knew other people that had carpal tunnel and surgery for it, but it was something different. And I knew that it was rheumatoid arthritis mixed in there because my finger, they're not straight. They curve. So I'm like always going to the sides. So I hear similar stories where they're like, I think I had lupus at this age because if you chart it, there were weird things happening. And it takes on average 2 to 6 years to get a diagnosis. So I would say I'm within that time frame.
And so I know the kidney transplant. So I know you had obviously have kidney issues. When did that start in your process? Because I assume once you got the diagnosis, you were started treatment, but then obviously the disease progressed even throughout the treatment. Yes.
So full disclosure, I did not do dialysis. I chose not to. I warded it off for as long as possible. So about 5 years ago, and actually before I moved from New Jersey to California 7 years ago, and I started to be put on blood pressure medication because that's where it started. They're like, okay, your blood pressure is a little weird. We're going to give you just 5 milligrams of this. That lasted for a little bit. Then all of a sudden, we were in Hawaii and they said that I was going to have a biopsy done because my lab results showed that there was a lot of protein in my urine. And I'm like, oh, okay. And sure enough, some weird thing happened where my feet, my legs, my limbs started to explode to the point where my skin was cracking because it couldn't hold all of the water. So when you have kidney issues, you do retain water. So I couldn't walk. So we had to rent a wheelchair for the duration of us going to Hawaii. But it was a lot of tests. When I got back, they did the biopsy. When you do a biopsy, you have to stay in the hospital for a little bit. And they're like, okay, you're stage 4 kidney disease now. And I was like, well, how did I jump from here to here? And then my blood pressure started to be regularly over 200. The highest it got up to was 280 over 115. And that's when I was hospitalized. And honestly, I was like, I don't want to win an award. How high can we go when it comes to a blood pressure? Right. And they're like, yeah, you can be over 300. And I said, that's pretty much death. So let's not get there. And it was trying to manage my blood pressure because if my blood pressure wasn't contained, the more it was killing my kidneys. So it was 5 different blood pressure medications that I was on, including a patch. I had to wear a clonidine patch, which I called my smoker's patch, and take all of those medications, and it still wasn't containing. So then they thought maybe it was lung related. So they did a lot of lung tests. They just found that my lung capacity was low, but it was not the actual source of the issue with the kidney problems. It was lupus advancing and attacking I also have Reynaud, so the blood vessels were being attacked, and then my kidneys were being attacked, and it was just overall dealing with every other month I'd be okay. Then the next month, my arms and even the water retention went into my chest, so I could feel it, and it was to the point where people were like, did you get a boob job? And I'm like, no, it's full of water, and it really hurts, and I have it everywhere. So it was a lot, and they said, you really need to do dialysis. I researched, because I have horrible insomnia, all night on alternative ways because I saw how it made my mom so tired and she wasn't able to do anything, that I found, and this is what worked for me. I have to disclaim that what's worked for me.
Right. Check with your doctor.
Yes, check with your doctor, even though a lot of doctors aren't into holistic. And you have to pay out of pocket sometimes for that. I did stem cell transplants. And stem cell transplants last for 6 months. So for the past 4 years, I've been doing every 6 months prior to the kidney transplant, stem cell transplants to reduce all of the issues with my kidney. And I made my doctors a believer because they were like, I was in the hospital after I came back from Hawaii. I had to clear TSA. They were already had a bed waiting for me and they were expecting me. And when they told me everything that they were going to do, we're going to start dialysis tonight. And I'm like, no, you're not. I'm going to discharge myself and I'm going to fly to LA to this facility that does it. And they're like, you're going to die. And then when I came back and they ran my labs again, and they're like, you made us a believer. We really didn't think that it was going to work.
So what's that process work of the stem cell transplant? How much what do they take out? What do they put back in?
They don't take anything out. It's just like a regular infusion. So you lay there and they put a certain amount of stem cells in. The procedure takes an hour from beginning to end. You just lay on the table, they take your blood pressure, then they put the IV in, and they're pumping in monoclonal stem cells. And they tell you how much you need based on, you have to give them your labs. The procedure costs between $6,000 to $10,000, depending on how much you would like to receive. And like I said, it takes an hour. It lasts for 6 months. You can do it multiple times. There are clinical trials that also offer stem cell transplants. I have a friend who has done that as part of a clinical trial, and that helped him as well. But I just want to make it clear to people. There's so many things, advancements in medicine, that it's not just doing all the other things that your doctor prescribes. They also put me on chemotherapy with Rituxan and Cytoxan. Those were very, very harsh on my body. I had lost 40 pounds. It was to the point where I was just throwing up water every day. I couldn't keep anything down. And I was like, nope, I'm going to go back to what I was doing because this is making me lose my hair. It's almost affecting my mental. I can't do this. And they're like, no, it's going to help. It usually helps people kickstart their kidney function, but it didn't for me. And no two lupus patients are alike. So what may work for me may not work for you.
Now tell me about your kidney transplant, because I know how you got your kidney was a little different as well.
Yes. So there are a lot of people that don't know about the kidney exchange program. And I was very adamant about not having my kids tested to see if they were a potential donor. But we had found out about the kidney exchange, and my husband convinced me finally. He was like, let me just do it. And so when you have a donor, you don't have to have a donor that is an exact match for you. You can have a donor that will swap. So it'll be like maybe 3 people down. I have a donor. My donor is a match for this person, but their donor is not a match for me. But then there's another couple, and it goes in that circle. So with that, you get bumped up to the top of the list once the donor is approved. So we were approved in November of last year, and they had a potential couple that was going to swap with us, but turns out because I have high antibodies, and antibodies are in everybody's system, but I had 99.9% antibodies. So they said finding a match was going to be very hard because I've had several blood transfusions, so my blood is not pure. But then another call came when I was in LA, and because I'm in the Bay Area, that said it was somebody on life support in Connecticut. Do you want it? Originally, our surgery was supposed to take place on Valentine's Day, which would have been like great. I had all these TV stations that wanted to interview us and like, oh, you guys are going to do a swap on Valentine's Day. And then they called me up and they were like, no, and my heart was broken. But yes, if you have somebody that is qualified, willing to donate on your behalf, you do get moved up in the National Kidney Registry. But also look into the kidney exchange program.
Yeah, I mean, anybody who donates an organ, I think it's so special. And so I commend your husband for doing, putting that out there for you. I think that's amazing.
Yes, he's still going to give one up, and he's still adamant about giving his up.
Waiting for the right match.
No, I told him to give me 6 months. I've only been 3 months post kidney transplant. And I said, give me 6 months and then you can donate your kidney. He doesn't have to, but also I forgot that once you do that, it gives a voucher. So I won't have to wait again. So if he donates, which he's going to do, it'll give a certificate. He can do it for 3 people. So he has it under me and my daughter and my son. If they should need a kidney transplant, they'll be at the top of the list.
Amazing. It's really amazing. So tell me a little bit before we wrap up here. Tell me a little bit about your advocacy and what you're doing and why you're doing it. I think you're a really inspirational speaker and a real powerhouse for sure. And so tell me a little bit about how that's come about.
Originally, I was advocating for my mother. So I had been advocating for years, doing the Lupus Walk. I was a part of the Lupus Foundation tri-state chapter over in New Jersey. So it encompassed New Jersey, Delaware, and Philly. So it would be a walk in her honor. And then it became a walk for both of us. But just seeing how much people do not know about the disease, but I was making sure that people knew if you were around me. So I made it a point. My advocacy is not only just to talk about lupus, I show you my everyday. I'm online all the time. If I get my blood work done, I'm like, I'm here for blood work. I'm here for this, because when people see me, even when I go to any of the Lupus Foundation events, people think I'm a donor. And I'm like, no, I'm actually a lupus patient. I carry myself differently. In the fact that I don't let people see me look, like the kids are like, Mom, we're just going to Walmart. I said, I'm not looking busted. No, I have to have everything going on. Even when I go to the hospital, my husband's like, seriously? Yes, I need you to go to the store and get me mascara. But showing people that they're not alone. And that's the biggest thing is you feel misunderstood and you don't feel like there's someone out there like you. So I make it a point to always show that, to always be positive, to show them like, look, the good, the bad, and the ugly. You may see me on vacation, but you will see me in a doctor's office. You will see me going through the struggle when I have to get Benlysta infusions. I don't hide any of that. So, and also making sure, like if somebody else wants to talk, it's okay to talk about it. We need to talk about it because ultimately, with or without a disease, people want to be understood and heard and seen and have a connection. So I'm trying to make a connection with everyone out there and let them know it's not a death sentence.
Sharing information is so important. Obviously, that's why we do this podcast. I think your story is really, it's got so many twists and turns and you've battled through every one of them. So I am super happy to have you on this show. I thank you very much for telling your story and for sharing it with our audience. And, I wish you nothing but good health.
Yes, thank you very much. And the listeners out there, you may have lupus and lupus is a burden, but you are not a burden. Remember that.
Well said. Well said. Thanks, Shamekka. Appreciate it. On behalf of the entire team at Lupus LA, we thank you for joining the Your Story, Our Fight podcast. Please tune in, spread the word, and come back for more inspiring lupus stories. I'm your host, Adam Selkowitz, wishing you good health, and to always remember, your story is our fight.